So once again, it's that most glorious time of year, kiddies. It's iPhone review season. Time to pull on the old rant pants. So I've been using Apple's fresh new iPhone Air for over a week now as my full-time smartphone, including quite a few days out in Munich for a work trip. And frankly, relying on this skinny wee bugger quite so heavily has had my arsehole nipping like a hungry chihuahua. After all, this thing has a stupidly dinky battery, and the last thing I needed out in Munich was to slam back several steins and then have it die on me before it could even navigate me to the nearest kebab van. So from an Android fan's perspective, is the iPhone Air actually worth switching to? And just for shits and giggles, how does it stack up against a similarly slender Android alternative, this here Infinix Hot 60 Pro Plus? Which incidentally you can bag for a fraction of the price of the iPhone Air, actually costs under $200. Alright, let's go! Now the absolute best thing about Apple's iPhone Air is perhaps unshockingly the design. And gotta say, this is the first iPhone that I've actually enjoyed holding since they gave up on those lovely mini models. Compared with Apple's usual chunky bricks, it just feels so nice in the hand, and compared with many Android alternatives as well. This is Xiaomi's 15T, which I'll be reviewing next, and even though it's not exactly super chunky or anything, just doesn't feel as comfortable to clutch. So the iPhone Air is of course impressively skinny at 5.64mm at the really thin bit, of course, just ignore that massive whopping great wadge up towards the top. But more importantly, it is ludicrously light at just 165 grams. I was initially worried with the top-heavy design that it might not feel very well balanced, but that's not the case. And of course, you've now got a handy bit of finger shelf action, finally, on an iPhone, so that just improves the overall one-handed experience. And honestly, it's hard to explain just how good the iPhone Air's hand feel really is. It's kind of like collapsing into a lovely, fluffy beanbag after spending your entire life sat on a spike. That design isn't perfect, though I do have a few wee grumbles, such as the shiny edging, which gets pretty greasy and nasty. And I do wish that that camera lens didn't poke out even further from that big old wadge at the top. Because not only does it look kind of cack, but it also means there's a fair bit of desk wobble. And the iPhone Air doesn't come in the greatest selection of colours. You got the boring white and black, and your only other options are light gold, which looks a bit too much like my piss after a couple of pints of Strongbow. Or this here sky blue effort, which is certainly a subtle hue to the point where a lot of people have just assumed it's the white model. But I've got to say, I find it rather soothing. You know, whenever Apple Intelligence has got my blood pressure up, all I need to do is flip this phone over, stare at the arse, and feel that murder rage start to subside. And the iPhone Air may be ludicrously thin, but it feels sturdy enough to not instantly crumble as soon as you sit down with it wedged in your arse pocket. So the actual frame is constructed from titanium, nice and premium, strong but also quite light. And then up front you've got Apple's ceramic shield glass version 2. So touch wood, so far that's absolutely fine. But then flip around to that rear and it's the OG ceramic shield. And as you can see, this has actually already picked up a few wee scratches in just over a week. And yeah, bugger all idea how that's happened. I've been particularly precious with the iPhone Air, mostly because I've dropped $1,000 of my own money on this thing. And that, boys and girls, could buy you an awful lot of whiskey. Only thing I can think of is perhaps when I was slipping it into my Insta360 gimbal thing, shooting a load of footage at Oktoberfest. More on that later on. Maybe I've accidentally dinged it then, but yeah, you're probably going to want to slap a case on your iPhone Air if you want to keep it pristine, which then does, of course, ruin the aesthetics somewhat. But it is at least IP68 water and dust resistant, so you can get as moist or as gritty as you like, no worries. And how does that Infinix stack up for the design? Well, it's almost as skinny and actually a wee bit lighter at 155 grams. Not quite as attractive, I would personally say, but it's certainly been more durable so far, although it's only IP65 rated, so not fully water resistant. Still a palm pleaser though, and it's actually slightly more curved at the edges as well, so I'd say it's just about got the edge over the iPhone Air in that department. Now, of course, everyone is spooging themselves into a sticky coma over the fact that Apple is finally offering 256 gigs of storage as standard with their £1,000 smartphone. And I know that some other premium smartphone manufacturers have been just as stingy as Apple on that front, but frankly it is something that they should have started doing bloody yonks ago. especially when massive great honking whoppers like Genshin Impact and Wuthering Waves take up a rather generous slice of that all by themselves. But of course Apple gives and Apple takes, and you might have more storage now, but you've also got less physical SIM support. Even here in Blighty, the iPhone Air is eSIM only, so it's just as well that a lot of providers are now offering eSIM as an alternative. And hey, speaking of eSIMs, brief segue into obligatory sponsored bit so Uncle Spurt can actually afford this bugger. Before I sod off abroad, I always do two things: clean my pants and buy myself an Airalo eSIM. Download the Airalo app before you leave home and you can snaffle yourself a competitively priced eSIM covering your entire trip, with whatever amount of data you reckon you'll need, from 1 gig to their unlimited data packages. So no worries about ridiculous roaming charges or actually bothering to hunt down a local SIM when you get there. Over 200 countries and regions are supported, so you can merrily TikTok in Tonga or sext in Slovakia. For instance, on my recent trip to Munich with the iPhone Air, I grabbed myself an Airalo eSIM covering the entire trip with 3 gigs of data for just £6.50. And that meant as soon as I landed, I could immediately message my only friend, a degenerate sock puppet, to let him know that I'd arrived safe. I know he worries. Ah, crap, that smelly bellend's not dead. So check out the link down in the video description to download that Airalo app for free. Get ready for your next trip along with their 20 million other fans. And hey, if you use the code TechSpurt, you'll even snaffle $3 off your first eSIM. So that'll probably bag you half a pint of Stella in the airport Wetherspoons. A massive thanks to Airalo for sponsoring this video, and now back to this skinny wee git. Now these past few days, iOS has been its usual slightly awkward self. A lot of the old quirks still haven't really been fixed, so notification system's still pretty ropey despite the fact that Apple has tried to bung a load of AI in there. Some apps simply do not seem to refresh in the background, which means you occasionally end up missing important messages and updates. But that action button's still a solid addition though. You can basically map this to any of your favourite features or tools. Fully customizable in the way that many Android versions of this just aren't, unfortunately. But sadly and somewhat predictably, 1 full year on, Apple Intelligence is still total trouser juice. For instance, Apple's keyboard never seems to actually learn anything, be it email addresses or actual addresses that you frequently input or common expressions that you use. And Siri, Jesus wept, Siri is still thicker than a blue whale's love truncheon. Even with the most basic requests, far too often I'll just get a something went wrong or some kind of excuse or something. If you try asking her about something just there on your smartphone screen, she'll have to defer to ChatGPT, which by the way buggers up itself more often than not. But honestly, Siri, it's like having Frank Spencer as your virtual assistant, although I guess at least Siri probably won't accidentally set your cat on fire. There's another classic TV reference that about 12 people will actually get. And of course, one of the big AI features slapped on here is visual intelligence. And this offers up a kind of half-assed, non-committal guess at what you're pointing your iPhone at, usually incorrect. Thankfully, you can ask ChatGPT, which is often more accurate. Otherwise, you can simply perform a Google search on it, which again, usually more accurate, but this is something that you can do on literally any smartphone. And there's bugger all actual Apple Intelligence here, which frankly is a bit of a godsend and means that visual intelligence is one of the better features. And seriously, I'm not even going to bother wasting breath on how hilariously shit Apple's image generation is. And that's when it can actually even be asked to actually spaff something out. You'd honestly be better off just asking a 4-year-old to sketch you something in crayon. As for the Infinix, how does that fare in the software stakes? Well, it's only 3 OS updates that you'll get with the Hot 60 Pro Plus, not as strong as Apple's commitment, but it is running Android, which is already a massive improvement, especially in the AI stakes. And I mean, comparing Siri to Gemini, that's just not a fair fight at all. That's like a battle of wits between Oscar Wilde and Paul Gascoigne, or a boxing match between Mike Tyson and a soggy paper bag. Of course, because it is super cheap, the Infinix Hot 60 Pro Plus does come with just 128 gigs of storage as standard, bit more forgivable when it's this sort of price point, but you can of course double up that storage to 256 gigs just by throwing a bit more cash at Infinix, and it's still a fraction of the price of that iPhone. Now the iPhone Air sports a 6.5-inch OLED screen with a 2736 by 1260 pixel resolution. It's sharp, it's poppy, and it's generally eye-pleasing. That would be pretty much ideal for a bit of gaming or movie streaming if it wasn't for that usual monstrous floating turd hanging around up at the top end there. But the auto brightness is a wee bit f***ed, though sometimes at night the screen will dim so far down that I really can't see a bloody thing. But then in the morning when I wake up, I'll groggily reach for my phone, hold it in front of my face, switch it on, and immediately be blasted full in the mug by the fires of Hades. In fact, on more than one occasion, I went into the iPhone settings just to check that the auto brightness was still enabled, which it was. And by the way, Apple, super intuitive with the settings, because yeah, where would you expect the auto brightness to be? Not in the display section, no. No, it's still buried away in the accessibility settings in another sub-menu right at the very bottom. So thank that search bar within the settings actually works. It's clearly not AI powered. But hey, crack out the champagne, handjobs all round, because Apple has finally gifted us 120Hz refresh on a non-Pro iPhone, so it doesn't feel all sludgy when you're swiping around. As for the Infinix, well, that boasts a sizable, crispy 6.78-inch AMOLED screen with similar resolution, 144Hz refresh, and auto brightness that actually works. And it's completely turd-free, so that's always lovely. And the Infinix phone also boasts a proper stereo speaker setup, whereas here on the iPhone Air, sadly, it is a mono speaker. I know, £1,000 smartphone with a mono bloody speaker arrangement. And it's that tinny wee earpiece speaker as well, not even a bottom mounted effort. Thankfully pretty loud when you do max out the volume, but there's absolutely zero bass here, no oomph whatsoever. And the lack of a stereo effect is rather crap. And thankfully the Bluetooth streaming's been basically fine. I had one disconnect when I was in London Bridge Station. Apart from that, it's been a stable connection. As for the performance, well, Apple has stuffed the same A19 Pro chipset as the regular iPhone 17 into this Air edition. It's not the 6-core GPU version that you get with Apple's Pro phones, but it's still more than up to the task with a bit of Wuthering Waves, Genshin Impact, etc. Can run those games on maxed out visuals with an almost entirely smooth frame rate. The iPhone Air does get rather toasty up towards the top end where all of those components are stashed after just about 10 minutes of gaming. It does get pretty hot to hold and that end of the screen is very warm to the touch, but thankfully not to the point where it's actually uncomfortable to keep on playing. It'll actually be rather pleasant in the winter, I would imagine. Of course, as usual, Apple offers up bugger all actual gaming features or tools or anything. It has a game mode where it basically, I think, just kills everything else in the background, and that's pretty much it. And meanwhile, Infinix makes do with a MediaTek Helio G200 chipset, so if you are a gamer, you won't be quite as happy. It's fine for optimized fare like Call of Duty, of course, but I would steer clear of massive 3D beasties like Wuthering Waves. Although hey, at least you do actually get a proper dedicated gaming mode packed to the tits with all kinds of great features to help keep you focused on your game. But of course the true trade-off for having a smartphone stashed in your pants that is this slender and lightweight is the rather measly battery life. You've got a 3149 mAh capacity cell, I believe it is, stuffed inside of the iPhone Air. And while the battery life hasn't been as pants as I expected it would be here on the iPhone Air, it's actually slightly better than on Samsung's Galaxy S25 Edge. It's still poor enough that it gives me heart palpitations every time I head out for the day with this thing. Because even with fairly light use, I'm talking occasional messaging, buggering about on the internet, bit of maps use, especially when I was in Munich, I had no freaking clue where I was going. I'd still typically only just get around 5 hours of screen on time from a 100% charge, and typically in an average day I will use my phone at least 6 hours. Obviously I am a slightly heavier user than most because I'm testing out these things I'm reviewing. I want to use them as much as possible. But yeah, certainly if you get any camera play on the go, or God forbid try hotspotting with this thing, then Jesus Christ, you can watch that battery absolutely plummet. So more often than not, I was already in power saver mode before I'd even had my first pre-dinner pint. And yeah, if you're not really using the camera or most of the features on your phone, you're just occasionally messaging or whatever, you'll be absolutely fine, zero battery anxieties. But then, if that's the case, why are you spending 1,000 frickin' quid on a smartphone? And if you're the opposite, you're quite a heavy user, especially a gamer, well, gamers can expect to enjoy Wuthering Waves for a little under 3 hours from a 100% full charge, which perhaps not too shockingly is the worst result I've seen in quite some time. And of course, Apple hasn't blessed us with fast charging just yet, but thankfully, because the iPhone Air has such a dinky battery in it, it doesn't charge horrendously slowly. So if you chuck a cable in there for about half an hour, you'll get around 45% battery back. And yeah, pretty much every day that I was testing this thing, I did have to plug it in for at least half an hour just to power it back up again before sodding off for the evening or whatever. But of course, if that often isn't an option for you, if you're just out and about all day long, you're probably going to want to get one of those power packs that you can slap on the back to keep this thing topped up. But then, of course, again, that ruins the beautiful, slim and light finish. So this is another area where Infinix wins the duel. You've got a over 5,000 mAh capacity battery crammed into that incredibly slender chassis. So even if the smartphone is glued to your hand pretty much all day, zero battery anxieties. You've got 45-watt fast charging as well. Although no wireless charging, but I will still gift this round to the Infinix purely because it doesn't make me absolutely shit my pants every day. And so let's finish this lovely wee iPhone Air review with a squint at the old camera tech. This won't take too long because it's just a single lens shooter, a 48 megapixel sensor, and despite Apple's insistence that it's like having two cameras in one, that's complete bollocks. Now, the iPhone Air is generally okay for simple everyday shots, especially of static subjects like food that you're about to hoy in your face. However, as usual, any motion will often result in blurry snaps, so if you've got any kids or pets, well, good bloody luck. Thankfully, the portrait mode is pretty good if your subject can sit still, or they're not actually animated at all, with a smooth bokeh simulation on the default settings. Detail levels aren't as good as most rivals, and Apple's heavy processing does brighten up most images, saturating the visuals quite a lot of the time, especially with strong contrast, although most people don't really seem to give a toss. The HDR Smarts aren't great for a £1,000 smartphone, gotta say, while night shots can take a wee while to capture, so you will need a steady hand. But if you can keep still, you'll usually be rewarded with a pretty decent pic, boasting quite vivid tones and not too much noise. It has to be said though, that lack of flexibility can be a bit of a ball ache at times, especially when I was in Munich. I could have really done with an ultra-wide camera to fit a bloody big building or monument entirely into frame. And while you can digitally zoom up to 8 times in total, I'd recommend giving up around the 4 times level. Anything higher than that and your photo will look like a bag of sick, especially if you're attempting to zoom in low light. But Apple's blowers have a respectable reputation when it comes to video capture, so I used the iPhone Air to shoot a lot of footage out in Munich, including most of my Oktoberfest video for the Spurthole channel. And this was accomplished using a combination of the 48 meg rear cam and Apple's 18 meg selfie shooter. Plus this here Insta360 Flow 2 Pro stick jobby. You can shoot up to 4K resolution video at 60 frames per second with both cameras, including Dolby Vision support, which can help to brighten up the overall picture. And I was certainly happy enough with most of the footage spaffed out by the iPhone Air. Even in softer light, you'll get a reasonably sharp picture, not too much noise creeping in, while the stabilization is also pretty good. The phone does get a little bit warm when shooting video, but I didn't see any performance fails while I was staggering around the Weissen halls, or getting rather moist in Marienplatz to record the most underwhelming clock of all time. Again, having more lenses would have helped, as that zoom isn't much cop at all, and at nighttime proper the visuals are a lot more grainy, but then that is to be expected. Anyway, if you want to see loads of iPhone Air sample video, well, check out that Oktoberfest vlog over on Spurthole. It should hopefully be going live around the same sort of time as this video if I can actually be asked to slap together the hours and hours of frankly drunken footage that I cobbled together. Oh, and Apple's camera button still sucks all of the arse. I just find this far too awkward to use thanks to the uncomfortable positioning. It's far more comfortable just to use the on-screen buttons old school style. She says quite a lot that Apple has disabled the swipe controls by default. And as for the Air's slender Android rival, well, the Infinix Hot 60 Pro Plus also sports but a single camera. It's a 50 meg shooter using Sony's IMX882 sensor, and yeah, it may look like a triple lens setup, but these extra pair are just lies. And yeah, that camera is simply fine, kind of similar to the iPhone Airs. You can check out more on the optics of my dedicated Hot 60 Pro Plus video anyway, which is live right now. And there you have it, my lovelies. That, in a tasty wee nutshell, is what I reckon of Apple's iPhone Air after testing it as my full-time smartphone for a week. And I gotta say, based on the actual hand feel alone, it probably is the iPhone that I've hated the least since the glory days of those mini models. Absolutely marvellous. But all the same, it is undeniably appealing to a rather niche audience, the crowd that doesn't really care about the camera tech and use their phone sort of sparingly, so won't have that battery anxiety going on. I really do appreciate the good hand feel of a nice slender lightweight handset. But of course, as usual, you will find similar Android offerings for a fraction of the price. Not many this slender and lightweight, but of course the Infinix Hot 60 Pro Plus, as I say, less than a quarter of the price of this thing, and yet boasts just as slender and lightweight a design, but also better battery life, AI that works. The only area it can't really hold up is the performance. Then to be fair, if you are a gamer, what the hell are you doing buying a bloody iPhone Air? Anyway, that's what this knackered old northern tosspot reckons, but it'd be great to hear your thoughts on the iPhone Air down below. Have you been using it as your full-time smartphone? Have you had that battery anxiety, etc, etc? Definitely please do let us know down in the comments below. Book, subscribe, ding that notifications bell, all the usual YouTube bollocks, and have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers, everybody. Love you.